You know, Mike McCollop was wrong. I'm the person standing between you and Skunk Baxter. But when you look at that last panel, I know all of us share the same view when you think about who is on this stage today and the purpose of this conference, to bring together those who make a difference in technology for substantive discussions and building relationships. Boy, that's what happened today. And I want to give all of our speakers a round of applause. That was phenomenal. There's a reason that we put Jeffrey Skunk Baxter as the final speaker today, because it's going to be a real treat for everyone. And by the way, everyone, in case there's any confusion, this is tonight is all attendees of CES Government. It is our second night reception that we have every year. And this one is special because of what's going to happen. But you get to hear, there are two Skunk Baxters. There's the one, and I encourage everyone, this is our first year of this publication, Connections. You got it. Ideally, before you come tonight, it's 2.5 pages. Read the interview with Skunk. It'll give you background on how he got into this, into our market, where he is a senior advisor to the top levels of our government in defense, missile defense in particular, defense intelligence, and national security. And the story of that, from the Doobie Brothers to, and his career as a musician, Steely Dan, and other bands, you're going to see right now the first Skunk Baxter that not everybody gets to know. And if you've been at CES Government, you've seen it. He's been part of our conference and a member of the board of the GBEF for 9 years now. So you get to see the side that he does for our government, and in less than 2.5 hours, you get to see the side that we all know him for. So I do encourage you to read that article before you come, because I think it's an interview with him, some of the favorite things, why he's doing what he's doing with our government, and some of his favorite songs. I think we'll hear him tonight. But it's a pleasure to have him back as always. So please give a round of applause to our final speaker for our opening day, Jeffrey Skunk Baxter.
Little known to many is that Jeffrey Skunk Baxter is a respected out-of-the-box thinker and advisor to senior leaders in the Pentagon, the intelligence community, on Capitol Hill, and for defense industry business leaders. Well known to almost everyone in his musical career, that includes Grammy Award-winning lead guitarist for the Doobie Brothers and co-founder of Steely Dan, and executive committee member of the Government Business Executive Forum. Please welcome to the stage National Security and Strategic Missile Defense Authority, artist and musician, Jeffrey Skunk Baxter.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So I know I'm standing between, I'm the last guy here, so I'll try to make this as quick as possible, because it's rock and roll and booze, and I know where my heart is. But so very quickly, I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can, because I know we're a bit stretched for time. So I'm going to go over a couple of concepts, talk a little bit about. I think messaging is going to be the central theme. So a couple of things. One, you're all familiar with free will, the Western concept of free will, kind of the law versus totalitarian interpretations. But what free will is, and we'll talk about that in a second. We live in a world of ubiquitous surveillance. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Chinese social scoring. You're familiar with the ubiquitous cameras. Even police officers in mainland China wear cameras on their glasses. So, and everything, all transactions, everything has to go through a central system. So you can sort of know what that means. So now we're looking at new concepts of warfighting, which are nonviolent. We're going to talk a little bit about messaging. There are a million words for it: perception management, perception engineering, influence operations, but it's all basically kind of the same thing. So I grew up in a household that was messaging. Has anybody ever here seen the show Mad Men? Well, Don Draper was my dad. It was Senior Executive Vice President J. Walter Thompson. And yes, he had the bar with the globe and everything, all that stuff. But I grew up in that atmosphere where people had codified capabilities and ways to sell people things. My dad's accounts were Kodak, Chevrolet, then Ford, then Kellogg's. And actually for 25 years, my dad's account was the US Marine Corps. So the idea of how do you tell people, how do you convince people to come over to your point of view? Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about, and again, I apologize if I'm moving fast, but I know I'm between you and the bar, so I don't want to stand in that way. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with von Clausewitz, the concept of war and diplomacy being much the same thing. They're basically, as some people say, war is an extension of diplomacy, back and forth. They're two states of the same thing. You can visualize it like ice and water. They are the same. It's still, two atoms of hydrogen and one atom of oxygen, but they're in different states. So war, diplomacy, war, diplomacy. Now, war fighting has always been basically bashing the crap out of somebody. Diplomacy has sort of been do the handshake shuffle and figure out a way to convince your diplomatic opposite on why he should acquiesce to what you would like them to do. But those lines are blurring now because we're talking about weaponizing messaging. We're talking about operationalizing messaging. If you are all familiar with what the Russians did in the Crimea, they would have not been able to do that had it not been for their ability to engineer perception. Now, one of the great original engineers of perception were the great religions, and the not so great religions. But the idea is that we know what's best for you, we have the inside track, and so we're going to just scare the crap out of you, and you're going to do what we say, because if you don't, all these terrible things will happen to you. And, in a time when religion was basically standing in the place that science now occupies, it was hard for people to argue with that. And trying to convince people to see things your way is as old as mankind. There are a number of ways to do it. Speech, when we spoke and speak, writing, reading and writing, printing press. Now we have myriad forms of mass communication. All have been employed as vectors to kind of sway opinion and thinking. But basically, in all but the most extreme cases, when somebody's hooking you up to a Delco battery or something like that, your final conclusions come from yourself, come from your own experiences, what you define as your own consciousness. Now, in many cases, that individual may not be completely convinced that something is in a particular way, but because of factors like peer pressure, tribalism, government, threat of physical harm, they have sort of, as they say, go along to get along. But mankind has entered into a new era because now we have the ability to actually alter the thought process. I talked a little bit about that last year when we talked about hacking the human brain. Core beliefs and basic emotion, all of these stuff are alterable now. We're already there. And I had conversations with folks who opined that most of what I spoke about was theoretical capabilities in our infancy, and probably would be quite a while before we really needed to worry about that stuff. Well, folks, it's already here. Again, we're going to go back to free will for a second. Western concept of law is based on free will. In other words, the idea is if you do something bad, it's your responsibility. You're going to get arrested. You agree to have a law enforcement group. You agree to have a judicial system. That judicial system is based somewhat on the Judeo-Christian ethic. You take the responsibility. Okay, I screwed up. I'm standing by to do the time, and it's my fault. However, I'm not quite sure that number one, we are getting away from that in a number of areas. But there's an interesting dialogue that you might want to read. And I'm sure that all of you in high school read The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. But in that book, there's a great chapter. It's only like 6 pages long. You can read it in the morning while you're having a cup of coffee. It's called The Grand Inquisitor. Alexei, one of the characters in the novel, opines and tells a story about, creates a little vignette where Jesus Christ goes into a 9th century town, and he is immediately arrested by the Grand Inquisitor. And you're all familiar with the Inquisition and what its methodologies were. Interesting crew. And so he's arrested by the Grand Inquisitor and thrown in jail. So he's sitting there in jail, and the Grand Inquisitor says, let's have a talk. So basically, there's a dialogue between Jesus Christ and the Grand Inquisitor. Jesus Christ says, I'm here on earth, Son of God. I'm here to tell people that they're free. They have free will. They can, basically, God has given them free will, and they can do whatever they want. And the Grand Inquisitor says, you're so naive. That's such bullshit. Basically, people want to I give them 3 hots and a cot, and they give me my freedom. They give me all of their freedom. I take care of them, then I tell them what to do. They let me basically run their life. And it's an interesting dialogue because there's interesting points brought up on both sides. But again, I'm not going to go into it. Dostoevsky does a much better job explaining it than I do. But there are a couple of wrinkles in this concept, too. We talk about DNA, and I already talked about brain hacking, presupposition to behavior. Birds peck, they fly. Animals do whatever they do. Beavers build dams. And it's not because they've studied in high school about how to build a dam. They just do it because their behavioralism and their capabilities are built in and encoded into their DNA. Now, we have, in modern day, a lot of capabilities to alter genetic code. You're all familiar with CRISPR-R, some of the newer technologies to modify or completely alter the human consciousness. And this begs the question, is the behavior of individuals really a function of free will or not? There are theocratic philosophies that posit that behavior is a result of a grand manipulation of a higher power, although deviations from social religious mandates are still punished if the individual steps out of line. But it looks like all behavior may be defendable using the ultimate Twinkie defense. Is everybody familiar with the Twinkie defense? Basically, some really smart lawyer was in court after some guy chopped somebody up and said, nah, man, it's not his fault. He had so many Twinkies, he ate so much sugar that it wasn't his fault. Now, it kind of worked out both ways. He did go to prison for life, but he wasn't executed because the Twinkie defense saved him. So and when I talk about Twinkie defense, I'm talking about anything at all that you could argue somehow inserts itself between the individual and free will. So convincing people that they're happy or shouldn't be has always been a difficult and an energy-intensive task. And now it could be that a few simple manipulations can make that simple. So what are some of these methods? Cognitive behavioral therapy. Anybody familiar with brainwave entrainment? Bioelectromagnetics. Brain fingerprinting is already here to detect lying before the individual even knows that they're lying, simply because they're not conscious of it. There's a pretty interesting gentleman named Professor Oliver Lowry, even has a patent on something called silent subliminal presentation. I'll just read you very quickly. A silent communication system in which non-oral carriers in the very low or very high frequency range or the adjacent ultrasonic frequency spectrum are amplitude or frequency modulated with desired intelligence and propagated acoustically, vibrationally, whatever it may be, through use of loudspeakers, anything that broadcasts from an electromagnetic source, whether it's audible or not. And modulated carriers could be, I could be doing this to you right now with my little thing in my pocket going, bye Doobie Brothers, or bye Steely Dan. Or I could wait till later. So tonight when we do the concert, I could be subliminally sending over the PA system those messages to you. So in layman terms, basically this system allows anybody who controls television, radio, audio, video, any electromagnetic transmission capability to control your thoughts. I know that sounds weird. Whether this capability has been used has been certainly up for discussion. But I remember when my dad, after he retired for the 90th time from J. Walter Thompson, and put something together called the Heartbeat of America for Chevrolet. They sold $2.5 billion worth of cars that hadn't been updated in 7 years. And when you walked away from the television set, you were in tears. And it wasn't even a car in a commercial. So I'm not trying to be facetious, but we're not kidding here. You know, this is the real thing. Now, the reason that this works so well is because, as I mentioned last year, the brain is a transducer. It is a radio electromagnetic entity. It broadcasts and it receives. So since it operates in the electromagnetic spectrum, it is subject to the electromagnetic spectrum. And basically, I've learned this lesson a long time ago because I score movies. Next time you're at a movie or watching a movie, listen to the music that comes up between 10 and 5 seconds before the next scene. It's preparing you. I mean, I have done this to, 4-star generals, friends, people who say, that's bullshit. Really, give me a guitar, sit down, and I will put you in 20 seconds through every human emotion possible. And the way I will do that is by manipulating the frequencies of the music that I play for you to force your brain to secrete a certain cocktail of neurotransmitters, whether it's epinephrine, vasopressin, oxytocin, adrenaline, serotonin. All of these in the right combination change your emotions. We are all drug addicts, by the way, because we are all addicted to brain chemicals. Without them, we'd just be zucchinis. So we are human beings, and we have to pay the price, for that. Anyway, now, am I just bullshitting you? Well, the first time Bach's Toccata and Fugue was ever performed, and you all probably know Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor because you've watched enough vampire movies to say da 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 da. You've heard that, so you're familiar with it. Well, they probably should have played it at the end of the church service, but they played it in the beginning, so everybody got so uptight they burned the church to the ground. Because Bach used something called the devil's interval. And in terms of music, it's the dominant chord plus a flat 5, a flatted 5th in that particular scale structure. Catholic Church called it the devil's interval. If you put that in a piece of music, they could do horrible things to soft parts of your body, and you don't want that. So Stravinsky goes, hot shit. So he writes The Rite of Spring, where he uses the devil's interval in the opening melody. Well, nice piece of music. I loved it. When I saw it in Fantasia, I thought, I love that. So what had happened when they first performed it? They looted 6 blocks of downtown Paris. People just went out in the streets and freaked out. So, you can say that what I'm telling you is not true, but the proof is already there. And by the way, our adversaries have already weaponized this capability, so we could get into that a little bit later. But okay, so now we live in a world where, I don't have Siri in my house. I don't have it on my computer. I don't have Alexa. I don't do any of that stuff, simply because I'm a paranoid son of a bitch. I've been around too long. I've been in the dark side for too many years. I don't want anybody, nowhere, nothing, listening to what I have to say. So, but there are many people that think this is just fine. But what happens if you ask Siri, or somebody asks Siri or Alexa for some information other than what's the best pair of athletic shoes I should buy to walk 15 miles a day? Much of this is driven by artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is, at the moment, pretty much driven by the people who program it. Something to keep in mind. So will the supposed power of AI to seduce people into thinking that their ideas and opinions should be subsumed to a higher power? Will there be instead of somebody in the pulpit, there will be Siri telling you what you think you need to know? Remember the story of the Grand Inquisitor. And isn't that what happened to religion in the rise of the theocratic state? And you can say, okay, Skunk's a crackpot, these all people are crackpots. Yeah, there were a lot of crackpots. Galileo was a crackpot. When him and Copernicus said, oh, no, this whole thing about the Earth being the center of the solar system, nah, that's not true. Well, what did the Catholic Church do? And I'm not picking on Catholics. Most religions have interesting points of view on things in their past histories. What did they do? They said, here's the deal. Either you say that that's bullshit, or we tie you to this stake and we cover you with lighter fluid and we're going to burn your ass. So Galileo goes, nah, I don't like that. Okay, that's all bullshit. Sorry. Yep, we're good to go. But now we revere him as one of the most brilliant human beings to ever walk the planet. So the people that we think are crackpots now, maybe this Professor Lowry, maybe people say, oh, this guy's out of his mind. Yeah, but maybe in 10 years from now, he will be the ultimate person to go to try to figure this out. Okay, so what's going to happen with Siri? Well, are you all familiar with the safe room, microaggressions and all this stuff? When you see something you don't like, you have to go to the special room and get the stuffed toy and sit there and cry for a little bit, for a couple of minutes and really feel good. This is real. God, I can't believe this. I was LAPD 15 years. I wish we had one of those. Wasn't happening. Will Siri then suggest that you go to a safe room? And when you go to that safe room instead of a stuffed toy, well, there'll be another thing there that generates electromagnetic frequencies that will help you get past your supposed microaggression. Now, I can't go into the genetics thing too much because I don't have time, but like I say, pretty much everyone here is familiar with the breakthroughs and capabilities in genetics. Now, here's a real-world possibility. I don't know if you're familiar with a woman named Melissa Click. She was an adjunct professor, but there was a news bit when there was a rally on campus, and a young college reporter for the college newspaper came up and was videotaping it, and she said, "You can't do that." I said, "Why not? I'm a member of the press." He said, "No, you can't do that. You don't have a right to do that." He said, "Yes, I do. Under the First Amendment, I have a right of free speech. I have a right to do this." And what did she do? She said, "I need muscle here." Now think about that for a second. Somebody confronted with the First Amendment didn't say, "You're absolutely right. It's enshrined in the Constitution, and we all are members." No, it's "I need muscle." Okay, well, what happens when that muscle turns from the physical to the electromagnetic, to the non-kinetic? That scared the crap out of me when I saw that, by the way. I just thought, this is not a good boy. So, okay, before you all go buy tinfoil hats, and by the way, actually tinfoil is helpful. It's helpful with, if you wear a tinfoil hat, you're pretty good against alpha radiation, pretty good against beta radiation, screwed with gamma, and with the problem with delta radiation is it actually amplifies it. So you got to pick and choose. But what you definitely want to do, though, is guard your credit cards, because people are walking by you every day, and all they're doing is just downloading all your information. And once you have the information, well, you all know where that can go. So, I think AI is kind of a cool idea. I love the idea of artificial intelligence. As a matter of fact, I work for a company called Roland, where we design musical instruments that help you think. I mean, if you're a guy who can't afford a band and you're sitting in a little cocktail lounge and you like to have drums and bass and, all that kind of stuff, well, in one of our keyboards, you push a button and you play a melody, and the artificial intelligence says, "Oh, that's a bossa nova. Here's a little cool bass part. Here's the drum part. Add a little horns and stuff." It starts to, based on its experience and how it's programmed, to actually follow along with you. So there's some good parts, but the problem is, already we're using AI for major decisions. Things like judicial adjudication, parole. They're using algorithms, artificial intelligence, AI algorithms, to decide what's going to happen to somebody's life. Are we going to get to the point where somebody says, this whole death penalty thing, I don't know if I want to deal with it. We're going to set up an AI engine, and that's going to deal with it. And then the question is, who programs it? Is it somebody like North Korea, or is it somebody like the United States or Britain or France? So the other problem is, like anything else, human beings are lovely because they're flawed, which I think is a good thing. I think flaws in human beings gives rise to art. As they used to say, "Kill my demon, kill my muse." So I think it's partially that's good. Problem is, what happens when you try to figure out if your AI engine is flawed? And will some leaders and some governments start to take advantage of that? Will AI say, you know what? These guys are screwing up. That's what human beings like. That's what I'm going to keep doing. I'm going to go down this path. And by the time you, as a human being, are able to find out where that's going, if the concept of Moore's Law is still in effect, we're going to be, how should I say, crapping in deep kimchi, when this comes down. And because how will anybody know? And I spend a lot of time doing a lot of wargaming. And I am on the red team. My job is to be the bad guy. My job is to make General Raymond and Randy Walden, who you heard speak today, brilliant speaker. My job is to make their life miserable because I'm there to beat the crap out of them. And I'm already, because I represent societies, totalitarian societies, that have no ethical boundaries. So I'm a very lucky guy. I can do whatever I want. I can take any human being that I want and experiment on them any way I want to and understand the basics of what we're talking about here. I don't have to go through any review board, you know. And are we going to then see a rise of something like AI-based eugenics? In other words, are AI machines going to say, you know, you're a really nice guy, but you walk with a limp and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you know, sorry. We appreciate thank you for your interest. I'm serious. I mean, I'm half joking, but I'm half serious about this. Now, I love technology. Believe me, I'm a guitar player. I'm a gear slut. I mean, I can't get enough stuff. Plugs in, beeps, lights up. I got to have it all. And I help design it. I work for a number of companies that do that. But here's what makes me sweat. People just plop their children in front of a television set. Or I've been at restaurants where there's a little 4-year-old looking at, you know, Tommy the Train or something like that while all the adults are having their third martini. Now, does anybody ever really think about that? I mean, just forget that the screen itself can convey all kinds of input without the parent's knowledge. But here's what scares the crap out of me. It's training children to trust the screen. Once you have that, if your mommy and your daddy says you can look at this, then in your simple childhood concept that if it's okay with mommy and daddy, then whatever's happening in front of this thing and coming out of this is okay with mommy and daddy. And I'll tell you when this got really weird, I got a call from a friend of mine. He said there's a guy who's working on the national security strategy up at the National Security Council that's as batshit crazy as you are. You guys got to get together. So I went and got together with Sean, and we started looking at different ways of what we were going to do with the national security strategy. And one of the things I said, why don't we create some sort of conceptual movement in terms of cyber hygiene? And I use that word cyber hygiene meaning simply the things that you don't do on a computer. It's like you don't put your hand on the stove. You don't brush your teeth with motor oil. You know, just things that you don't do. Maybe we should be teaching our children from the day that they have that screen until they're adults. And they looked at me like I was from the planet Mars. I said, why would we want to do that? So that really started me thinking. I said, well, wait a minute. Now, if we think that Siri or Alexa could actually alter your thinking, is anybody familiar with internet-connected Barbie dolls? The Kayla doll. Well, you know, I'm not going to get into some of the wargaming stuff, but I had a ball with that one. And one of our allies got so uptight that Germany has now banned all IoT-capable dolls. And as well, I get it, as well they should. Not only could I monitor the children's behavior, but I could probably alter their behavior. I mean, think about that for a second, how a little scary. And I didn't design the toy. I'm again assuming that Mattel or whoever makes the thing has got my best interests at heart, my child's best interests at heart. So that, to me, starts to really begin to worry me. As a matter of fact, you all probably know the story. It was a washing machine, an IoT, an internet-connected washing machine in Minneapolis that introduced a ton of malware into the web. It was a washing machine. You know, when I wash my socks, I use that washing machine. And it just now basically put a number of bots into the U.S. electric grid. It's a washing machine, for Christ's sake. It's a doll, you know. Anyway, there's a bunch of other things I would have liked to cover, but because we don't have much time. Anyway, thank you for letting me ask these questions. I haven't answered as many of them as I probably should, but I think it's good to leave you all with the questions because as sentient human beings, I got a feeling that you all will be much more helpful and probably much more erudite and much more incisive and insightful than I will be. And I hope you all come up with the answers to the questions. I mean, we've already been washed over with this wave, and I'm afraid we don't even know it. So thank you.
as always. Okay, everyone, what a great day, and we really were supposed to be out of here 20 minutes ago. The band's going to set up. Back at 6:30, it's casual, it's rock and roll. So go relax a little bit, and we'll see you in a couple hours.